All right, so this video is going to cover a topic that I like to talk about a lot as far as work and productivity goes. But this video's topic is 1 hour of deep focus can yield 4 hours of productive work, right? And what I mean by this is by utilizing a specific set of tools and by utilizing a specific lifestyle, we can turn what would normally be an hour of focus into 4 hours of productive output. And what I mean by this is we can spend an hour engaged in work and produce what most people would only be able to produce after 4 hours of work. And the reason we're able to do this is because of the tools I'm about to lay out for you in this video, as well as utilizing an intensity of focus. So let's start with getting into these tools. And at the end of the video, I'm going to give you guys a tip for how to focus better while you're working in order to optimize for the most possible output. So the first productivity tool that I have is an optimized environment. So the way we start off any big work block, or if you have a project that you know you're about to dive into, what you want to do is you want to set up an environment that is specifically catered towards that specific work task. So what I mean by this is if you are a YouTuber, for example, and you have a big project for YouTube that you're about to start, maybe you want to go for a series of daily uploads and you know that you're going to be consistently recording a lot of videos. What I would do in that situation is set up an office space that is specifically optimized for what you're trying to achieve. So in the case of a YouTube video, what you would do is you'd set up that environment in a way that optimizes for a clean background, right? Having all of your recording equipment ready to go, having any scripts or anything that you would need for scripting there on the desk available for you, but maybe out of the way as well. Having a clear and open space is one thing that I prefer as far as YouTube videos go, because I like to have a lot of open space around me when I'm recording. It helps to mitigate distractions, and it's also good for the actual content itself because there's not a ton of clutter in the background. Um, but the way that you do this is you set up an environment that is specifically optimized for whatever task you want to do, and that way you can use this second tool a little bit easier. But also, what you're doing is you're creating a mental habit. Every time you enter this environment, your brain understands that this is for the purpose of creating content. Or in the case of building a brand, let's say you're doing product development related work or marketing related work in a specific environment, your brain will automatically associate that environment with that specific kind of work. So that is a very good start, is you want to optimize a specific space for the work you're trying to accomplish. And of course, if you have one space that is your workspace and you do all of your work related tasks in that one space, um, this still stands. It's just a matter of making it simplified, clean, organized, and easy for you to get into that flow state whenever it is time to start work. So the next productivity tool that I have is removing distractions. So before we start each work block, what we want to do initially is we want to remove distractions, right? We want to do this before we actually get into the session, in order to optimize for the most flow during the session. So what I say is before we start, what we want to do is we want to remove distractions. So we want to remove any and all physical distractions from our environment. This can include our phone, if our phone is a unit of distraction, right? For me, my phone is actually my Wi-Fi, so I don't take my phone out of my work environment, but that is also because I've trained myself not to use my phone as a distraction. I don't go on my phone for basic pleasure, basic enjoyment, basic entertainment. I go and read a book for that, which when I go to the office, I don't have that option. So when I'm at the office, my only option, the only thing I'm able to focus on is the work that I'm doing. And in that case, my phone is actually a unit of working. I'm either recording on my phone or I'm using it as my Wi-Fi, as a personal hotspot. So the phone is a consistent one for most people, but there can be exceptions in certain cases. Other distractions physically can include anything that is eye-catching to you, anything that may catch your attention during the session, anything that may take your attention off of what you're doing in your environment. So this can be decorations in your room. This can be fancy lights, LEDs, things like this. You want to turn those off if you're working, or let's say you're working at night and you have LEDs in your room. You would want to turn them to a boring color and you would want to dim them as much as possible so that it pulls your attention away from what you're doing as little as possible. And so you can use this example across all different aspects of your environment. If you look around your environment and you can identify anything that would take your focus away from what you're doing, you want to remove that. This can also go as far as your digital environment. If, for example, I am guilty of this, but I have a solution, which I'll get to. However, if, like me, you have a lot of different tabs open, because I'm running multiple businesses, so I have multiple tabs open for multiple different things. So if this is you and you have a lot of tabs open on your computer, or if for whatever reason you have a lot of apps open on your iPhone, this is one thing I don't do. I don't leave apps open on the phone. But if this is you and you do, what I would recommend is, if you can, clear out as many of those tabs as possible, X out of as many of those tabs as possible. But in my case, I have a lot of tabs open that are important, right? I have a lot of work related tabs open that I need to keep open. So what do you do in this case? One thing that I recommend is Google has a feature where you can actually put tabs into folders, so you can organize them into specific folders. I have mine organized into an education folder with all of the courses that I'm taking. I have one with scripts that are unwritten. I have one with scripts that are written and completed. I have one for my drop shipping and e-commerce business. So I have multiple different folders of tabs, which organizes them in a way that I can just pull out the ones that I need. And the other thing that I will say is, for example, when I'm writing, what I do is I take the tab that I'm writing with and I remove it from the group page, so that it's on its own web page, right? And then you can go from there. You can just have the one tab open on Google and just work from there until you're done with it, and either put it back into your main page, or you can just X out of it if you're done with it. But that is one thing I'll recommend for the digital environment, is to, when you're working on something and you're using a specific tab, pull that tab open by itself so that you're able to just focus on that specific thing and only that specific thing. Another thing you can do is, beforehand, if you know you're going to be working on a specific task or project, you can pull that tab out ahead of time so that you don't have to open up a big group of tabs and look through all of them when you're beginning that project or that task. So the next thing we have to work on is removing psychological distractions. So psychological distractions include anything like thoughts that conflict with what we're trying to achieve, any ideas or desires, mental desires that conflict with what we're actively trying to do at the moment. So removing psychological distractions looks like addressing any thoughts in our mind, right? There are always thoughts floating around in our head, and a lot of times we like to try to ignore them and just try to push through. If we want to get real productive work done, what we need to do is we need to actually remove these mental distractions before we can even focus on what we're doing fully. Because we need 100% of our brain power if we want to produce 4 hours of work in one focused hour. We have to be able to remove these mental distractions to commit 100% of our mental energy to the task at hand. So, this means that removing any thoughts that may conflict with the current task, removing any random thoughts that come in, and practicing a sense of practicing a form of meditation onto the task at hand, right? And what this looks like is, as we work, anytime we notice our mind become distracted, or anytime we pick up on a part of our mind that is not focused, we bring that portion of our mind back into this present moment, back into this exact task that we're doing right now. And if we do this regularly, consistently over a long period of time, what we do is we get to a point where we can amass heavy results based off of just a little bit of work, because we're able to commit 100% of our mental energy to that task and do it very quickly and very easily. Think about, if you are meditating and you have been meditating, the difference between how quickly you can get into that state of meditation now versus back when you first started. You would have to fight thoughts for 10, 20 minutes before you even felt a glimpse of that state. Now you almost feel it as your natural state. And it's very similar with work. Once you get to this point where you are used to committing all of your energy, all of your mental focus to the task, then you can do it very easily. You can do it very quickly. You can lock right into the task at hand and push through the next 2 hours, produce all of the work that you need to produce, and move on to the next thing. Now, the other thing that you'll have to work on, there are psychological distractions, but there are also emotional distractions. Any emotions that conflict with what you're trying to achieve or the work you're trying to get done are eventually going to take some of your attention away from that task. And so we want to address these emotions before we actually get into the work task. So address any emotions you may be feeling in the moment, address any negative emotions, address any stuck feelings in your body, address anything that is going to conflict with you achieving the best possible results. And once you have addressed it, you can then remove it. And once you have removed it, you can then go ahead and focus on what you need to do. The last tool that I have is routine. So all of the other tools are great, but the most important one is routine. Because when we do the same things at the same time every single day, what happens is we condition our brain to be primed for this specific activity. Meaning, if day after day after day we don't do a lot, right? We sit around, we watch TV, we eat junk food. Well, our body actually responds to this by giving us less energy. Those who blame laziness to having no energy and being lethargic, the reality of that is it's actually reversed. They feel like they have no energy and they feel lethargic because their habit and their condition is to sit around. The same is true for exercise. Those who exercise more typically have more energy, even though they're using more energy. And this is because our bodies prime themselves for whatever specific things we are doing consistently every single day. So that means when we're exercising every day, our body gives us more energy to use because it expects us to need that energy. Same thing happens with work. When we condition ourselves and prime our brains for work, our bodies become ready and able to focus deeply on that work task at that specific time every single day. Our brain is prepared and primed for that work task, meaning we're able to commit a lot more mental energy to it. And since we remove a lot of the resistance associated with getting started, we actually are able to take each work bout a lot further because there's no fight to get into the flow. The only battle, the only resistance is to keep pushing through and keep getting more work done. So that is why routine is so important. Pick a time that is best and then stick to it every single day. And just watch how your productivity transforms. With the same work block, you'll be able to get twice as much work done by the end of 3 months if you stayed consistent. Now, with these productivity tools, you could increase your productivity to the degree of achieving 4 hours of work in one deeply focused hour. Now, I say this, but at the same time, we don't really get any optimized work done. We don't get any optimized performance out of a single hour of work, right? This is not necessarily a video for the people who just want to work an hour a day. If you needed to, these tools can help you to get as much done as possible within 1 or 2 hours. But the optimal way to do this is to create an hour that produces 4 hours of normal work and then do 4 of those hours every single day, 4 or as many as you need, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. So, the last tool that I have is actually going to be one of the most important. This last tool is going to teach you how to basically take your focus and intensify it through the work block. Now, I have already kind of mentioned this briefly, but the tool that I'm about to talk about is not necessarily a tool, but a skill set. It is a way of working, and it is a focal point for your mind, for your attention, while you're trying to work through any project, any task, right? So I talked about it briefly as a sense of meditation, where you are meditating back onto the task. Now, what I did not mention was the how you can intensify your focus into this work block as you go. So, when you first start, a lot of people say, "Oh, just get started, just get started, just start writing," which is great. But at this level of focus, you won't achieve much. You won't get much done. However, if you just start writing, and then as you notice yourself get distracted, or as you notice yourself enter a new barrier of resistance, what you do is you refocus your attention onto the task and you intensify your focus just a little bit. So you just push through that little bit of resistance, you intensify your effort slightly, and you keep going. And eventually, this level of effort feels natural, feels easy, right? And then as soon as that happens, you can go a little bit further into it, bring a little bit more attention into it, and then that'll create a new resistance barrier. And as you intensify your output and push through this resistance barrier, you then make that output, that level of output, easy. And so what happens is if you do this for an hour or 2 hours, you get to a point where you are in a deep flow state and you are able to produce the best work you've ever produced while also producing it fast, quickly, right? You're able to amplify your output almost 100-fold because of the amount of attention and intensity you have focused into this specific task. So that is all I have for this video. If you guys have any questions or if you learned anything value, you can leave that in the comments below. But that is all I have. And if you want to see more content like this, press the subscribe button. But other than that, I'm out of here. Peace.